Hello everyone and welcome to this chess tips video, which is also the 200th video for this Nick Butts Chess channel. And that is possible thanks to all you viewers and subscribers supporting this channel. So be sure to check out some of those 200 videos at the Nick Butts Chess channel. And now back to the chess tip of the day. Do not underestimate your opponent. And so in this game that we will be reviewing, we see that Yasser Seirawan plays against Anatoly Karpov. And Karpov was a former world chess champion, and both of these players are all-time greats, chess giants. And the game begins here with knight to f3. And so this is a little not an unusual move, but more often you see e4, d4, or even c4. But this move is played as kind of a waiting move to see what Karpov will play and to try and steer Karpov into a desired opening. So in this matchup here, Yasser Seirawan had help from Viktor Korchnoi, who had just recently played Karpov in the World Chess Championship, and Seirawan was a coach or assistant on Korchnoi's team. So the information he learned from Korchnoi's preparation definitely helped him in this game. And as well, Karpov had a large team to help him. So these variations are well thought out. They had teams of people going over the moves to try and figure out what would be best in different situations. So Karpov responds with knight to f6, and then we have c4. Another move to see what Karpov will do, how he will respond. And so he plays e6 here, and then knight to c3. Still, Seirawan is not committing so much in the center until he sees what it is that Karpov is planning. So after this move, Seirawan plays d4 here, and Seirawan is steering the game into a desired variation, which we see the game started as an English opening, but after this move, now Seirawan has helped steer this game into a Queen's Gambit declined, which was what he was hoping for. And the title, do not underestimate your opponent here. That title comes about because Karpov at this time was a world champion, the best player in the world at the time. And with his team backing him up, he felt that he wouldn't have too much of a problem winning against this younger chess master, Seirawan. Although in their only other previous encounter, Seirawan did gain an advantage, but failed to convert that to a win, and there was a draw. So he probably should have won a prior game against Karpov, but Karpov escaped with a draw. So I'm sure Karpov, with him and his team working together, were looking for a win here against Seirawan. And so the game continues with bishop to g5 here. So there's a fight in the center. The c-pawn is attacking on d5 with the knight. The bishop's attacking the knight here, which is helping cover this d-pawn. And so the game continues with h6, forcing Seirawan to make a decision to retreat or to capture. And he retreats here, keeping pressure on this knight and possibly exchanging bishops if that knight moves. And so now the game continues with castling. And here an interesting move, rook to c1. And the reasoning behind this move is that after an eventual trade of pawns here, this half-open c-file can be used by the rook to attack here. So the game continues with b6. So we see in this position that these light squares are blocking the c8 bishop. And so the bishop looks for another way to be activated by bishop to b7, or even bishop to a6 is possible. And so after exchanges in the center here, we have multiple pieces being traded off, and queen ends up here on this e-file aimed at the king. And here Sarewin comes up with a move that's a little out of the ordinary. Instead of playing e3 and allowing his bishop to come out through this diagonal, he decides instead to play g3 and bring his bishop up to g2. But this allows some pressure here to build up with the rook and queen threatening here, so that if the bishop moves, black would not be able to castle without possibly this pawn being captured on e2. So the game continues with rook to c3, a very interesting move by Sarewin here. The threat is the possibility of attacking, moving to e2 here, attacking the queen and rook, and exchanging off with a check, but also protecting this knight in case the bishop moves here to b7, and if these pawns are exchanged, the knight could become a target here, and the pawn would not be able to capture. Anyway, this is a very good move here. And the response, knight to a6. And so Sarewin admitted that in this position, his team had done much work, or I should say Korchnой's team. They had done much work, and this was one move they had not looked at. They anticipated quite a few other moves, but they felt that this move would not be played because generally you don't want to bring a knight on the edge of the board. But this knight is moved here to be able to help cover this c5 square so that the pawn may push to c5, and if captured, knight will recapture, and if the queen were to capture here, black would lose the d5 pawn, but after bishop to b7, even with the loss of this pawn after these exchanges here, black would have the initiative. So I won't play those out on the board because there's more action here to be seen. So queen to a4. So now there's a threat of possibly moving this e-pawn and the bishop and queen piling up on this knight. And so here we see c5 was played. So this was Karpov's plan, and his team had come up with these moves to play c5, and if there was an exchange, the knight would just recapture. But this was a blunder. As we can see, the evaluation jumps up here in white's favor. So it looks like instead the best move, if we go back, after queen to a4, it looks like b5 was the best move, attacking the queen. And the queen, it would be bad for white to just capture this pawn, because then the rook would be able to come out here to b8 and attack the queen, driving the queen away, and then the rook would be able to capture the b2 pawn with a threat of a check here. So white wanted to avoid these problems in this position if this had occurred. And the game would maybe continue in this fashion. And anyway, in this position, it looks like the game would have been even. But after the blunder, so after queen to a4 and this blunder move by Karpov, we have the continuation, e3 here. A great move, attacking the queen. If the queen were to just move, then this rook could be captured here and with a check. So the best move was the best move, bishop to e6, is what Karpov responded with, blocking this attack. And so now Sarewin continues with queen takes a6, going ahead, capturing this knight. Now he's ahead in material. And so in the game, Sarewin admitted to thinking that this was a planned variation, that Karpov would never just give away a piece unless he was sure that he would obtain an advantage. But in this position, as we shall see, things turned and for the worst for Karpov. And so now, after c takes d4, we have the rook moving, the best move, to move over here and guard this b4 square, because there was a threat of a queen check here, which would leave the white king stuck in the center of the board. And so now we have bishop to f5, and another mistake by Karpov. And we see after this bishop to f5 move, well, before we dive further, let's see what the computer recommended. So it looks like d3 would have been the best move, but even then, the evaluation is +1.5 to white. But the game may have continued with these moves. The queen capturing, then this pawn pushing forward, which would allow a capture here, but the bishop would gain more activity. And it looks like the best move would be to attack this rook first and then capture here. So after a block, we have capture, capture. And so in this position, white would be ahead. As far as pawns, let's see, he would be ahead by 1 pawn and also 2 pieces to a rook here ahead. So white should have the advantage once he gets his king into safety and activates this bishop and rook. But in the game, if we go back, after rook to b3 to guard this b4 square and prevent a check by the queen, stranding white's king in the middle, bishop to f5 was played. And so the computer gives this as a mistake, and the evaluation is in white's favor here. And after the response, and it looks like there is one good response here, and that is bishop to g2, a great move. And so now the game continues with bishop to c2, threatening to attack this bishop, or excuse me, attack this rook with the bishop, and then leaving the possibility of a check here, stranding the white king in the middle. So here, knight to d4 is played. And after bishop captures, knight captures, now we have rook at a to c8. And the queen check was not played here, as if we can go back and see what would have happened if that were to be played. So if the queen move were played with check, we see queen to b4 check, and that's what the computer says is best in this position. Interesting. But the king would be able to just move, and if there was a further threat of possibly a rook jumping here, well, the knight is covering this square. So the king would be safe here. This bishop would be able to move up to f3, protecting this e-pawn, and the king would be able to jump into this g2 square and activate the rook. So now this queen move would not have a good follow-up. So in the game, instead we had, let's see, after knight captures on b3, the game continued with rook to c8, and now bishop moving up to f3 here, as I mentioned, moving the bishop up to cover this e2 pawn, and now rook to c2 here, which is the best move, trying to grab a pawn to regain some material. And after castling, we have rook takes b2, the best move, gaining back a little bit of material, but Karpov is still behind here. And now this rook has been activated on the half-open d-file, attacking with the bishop, possibly. We'll have a capture here. And in the game, rook to d8 was played, helping to protect this pawn. And now knight to d4 is played to bring this knight into the center with threats of attacking the queen here, or a fork here of the rook and the queen. And so this rook is moved up to prevent a fork, and the knight moves here anyway, attacking the queen. And now we have queen retreating, as there would be threats also of the queen checking the king here. And now the knight captures a pawn on the queen side. So it looks like in this position that black could just move to a8 here, and with the rook and queen just capture this knight. But after rook to c1, if this move were played, then there's this threat here of a check. And if the rook were to capture, we have this move, which checks the king, and the queen would be attacked. So white would be ahead in this position. So that's one reason why this pawn wasn't captured immediately. And so if we go back, after the knight captures the pawn, Karpov responds with rook to c7, the best move in this position, taking control of this open c-file, and also preventing a possible check by the queen here, harassing this king. All right, so now we have a4, the best move. And what this does is allow the knight to retreat here and be covered by this pawn, so that the rook and queen cannot capture that knight there. And now finally Karpov decides, well, now I will go after this knight as I'm covering the c square here. I have the c file, the the rook cannot move and take control of it, but Sarewin responds with just capturing here, taking this central pawn. Now the bishop on f3 has this diagonal threatening to capture the queen. And so after queen captures the knight, if we look at this position, now it is black, I believe, that is ahead in material. Let's evaluate here. So 5 pawns to 4, but a rook to a bishop. So in this position, Karpov has jumped ahead in material, but after that move, the advantage has swung even more in white's favor. And after the knight capture here, Cerwin plays rook to d8, a great move, attacking this king, forcing it into this h7 escape hole. So after the king goes there, we have queen to d3, further attacking the king. And so here, f5 is played. And the reason that g6 was not played, which the computer says that that is the best move. So I'll go back and take a look at what would have happened if g6 were played here. So with g6, now we have the possibility of d4, attacking this rook and threatening a mate with the rook over here. Queen and rook attacking, threatening mate up here on h7, or excuse me, h8. And so here the game may have continued with f6 to block. And now the queen could just capture. And so after this, it would be white ahead in material and should have no problem winning this game. And so if we go back, that was avoided by Karpov, who played instead, after queen to d3 check, Karpov plays f5 here, blocking, but this will be captured, of course. And so after queen captures with check, g6 is played. So the reason Karpov did this is to allow room for his rook and queen to help defend here. But it is no use. After queen to e6 here is played, here Karpov resigned. Now we can look at how the game may have continued, and it is quite tricky, but the game may have continued after queen to e6. And we see in this position it is plus 11.8 in white's favor, even though black is ahead in material. And that's because the attack, well, now the evaluation is even, excuse me. So material is even. We have a bishop and two pawns versus a rook. And white is ahead because of the attack that he has on the king. So if black would have played the best move, checking white, and white just escapes, and now the queen moves over to help prevent a mate threat of queen to g8 here. But the game would continue with the bishop increasing the pressure here on this g6 pawn, and now we would have the rook moving in here to cover this, because if the bishop were to capture and the queen captures, then we have a possible check here with the rook. So rook to c7 covers that, and now the rook repositions to d6, adding even more pressure on this g6 pawn. And so king to h8, the king is running out of moves here. He's trapped, but this would be an inaccuracy. It says that rook to d2 would have been the best move, but that would just give up a rook and delay the inevitable. White would be very much ahead in material then. So after king moves to h8, we would have a check, a block by the queen, and then another check. But now, after the queen blocks, the rook comes up here and checks. So the king would be forced back down into this position again, and a sacrifice of this bishop, a brilliant move, would allow this, a king recapture instead of the queen. So if we go back, if the queen would have recaptured here, queen captures on g6, that would allow a mate threat. So we'll take a look at that. Queen to h6, and that would allow just a mate in one with queen to h8 here. So after bishop captures on g6, the best move would be king to g6. But that would lead to a mate in 6 here, which this is all deep, tricky stuff here, which just shows you how long or how much, how deep how deeply the grandmasters at this level can think ahead. And so here we have a check, and the game would continue with king to g5, h4. If the king would jump into this hole, which is the best move, that would allow a rook check, a block by the queen, and here there are different options, multiple checkmating routes, but king to h3, cutting off this escape square, and then rook to b3, which would prevent a pawn push with mate here. So now the queen could check, and after the rook blocks, we have a capture with mate here. So that is one way this game could have concluded. And this was just a crazy, pretty incredible game. And it just shows how each of these players used the teams that they worked with to find variations and different possibilities. And the world champion, with the backing of his team of chess masters, just assumed that he would be able to come out ahead, and perhaps underestimated his opponent, because the blunder that he played, his opponent jumped on that and just continued with the best moves. And if we look at the game review here, it's pretty crazy. Check this out. 99.5% accuracy in this game for Yasser Seirawan with the white pieces here versus 87.3. So Karpov, was caught off guard, it seems, and he made some inaccurate moves, but Yasser Seirawan played a brilliant game here, and quite an incredible game with 99.5% accuracy. So congratulations to Yasser Seirawan on this brilliant game. Well, remember the chess tip of the day: don't underestimate don't underestimate your opponent, or you could be on the losing end of the game here. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this 200th chess video for this Nick Butts Chess channel. If you did, please like and subscribe. Feel free to leave comments or suggestions, and check out and enjoy more of those 200 videos at my Nick Butts Chess channel. Thank you, everyone, all viewers and subscribers. I thank you for supporting this channel. Have a great day, everyone.